If you haven't been told about hidden stress or what it does to your body starting from the day you're born, or what's being done to prevent and reverse the damage, it's time to find out. I'm Douglas Mulhall, and I'm the author of this best-selling book, Discovering the Nature of Longevity, Restoring the Heart and Body by Targeting Hidden Stress. And Laura Cross is going to be interviewing me on Mindful Mondays about this topic. So tune in, and we'll see you there.
Well, welcome everyone to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. And as you know, this is actually Christmas. So I want to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, however you see it. But I am your host. And as many of you may or may not know, on December 21st, 2004, I lost my husband to an aortic arch dissection / heart attack when he was only 36 years old. Since then, I have lost family members and friends to heart issues, mostly brought on by stress. So when I met Douglas Mulhall, I knew I needed to have him on as a guest on the show, as I am not the only one that has lost someone close to them. So without further ado, I would like to introduce everybody to Douglas Mulhall, the author of Discovering the Nature of Longevity. Douglas,
and here we are. Here we are.
On Christmas, no less. Douglas, you talk a lot about, the stresses and hidden stress. What exactly is hidden stress and how can it impact our health and longevity?
Right. Well, Laura, it's Christmas and everyone's already stressed out. So what
holidays do that to people.
I know. So I'm going to start actually with the story of how a hopeful story of what happens when people address that stress and get rid of it. It's a short story. Do you mind if I tell it?
No, absolutely. Please do.
Okay. Well, Peter Bartelli was a pilot with United Airlines, and 4 years before retirement, he flunked his stress test with the FAA, and they told him that he had a blocked stent. He had a single stent that had been placed in his arteries, and it had blocked up. And they said, well, you can't have a second one put in because that goes above our regulations. You can't have an operation because that also goes above our regulations. So hang up your wings and you're done and go and find something else to do. Now, that was a certain problem for Peter because, number one, he was going to lose half of his pension. Number two, the love of his life was flying. And so those two things put together were pretty devastating for him. So he did something quite unusual, but a few people have done it, as we'll talk about later. He fired his cardiologist. He went. A friend of his told him about another cardiologist who he had been to, who actually had a new therapy that was actually an oral therapy that he had taken and that had worked for him to restore arterial health. So Peter did this, and at the same time, the new cardiologist told him he also had to change his diet. So he did these two things at the same time. So a few months later, much to the surprise and shock of the FAA doctors, he passed his stress test with flying colors, and so much to the extent that actually the doctors thought that the original measurements had been faulty. And Peter flew for 10 more years by his own choosing and retired a happy guy. And I just spoke with him a few months ago, and to this day, he's still running his car around the Sebring racetrack. So it's an amazing story. It's a story of hope and recovery, and most of all, thinking outside the box. And that's my Christmas message for everybody. That is, if you take control of your health, go get a second opinion and see what you can do about it. And the book that you just mentioned, Discovering the Nature of Longevity, is actually the story of hope that has many other stories in it like this, but it also tells people about, and that was your question, what are these hidden stresses and what is being done about it? So in a nutshell, these hidden stresses are many, many things, but they're things that you don't notice, see, hear, or smell until they make you sick. And that's why they are hidden. And the two major stresses that I talk about in the book are low levels of toxic heavy metals. So low levels of toxic heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, and arsenic, and we'll cycle back to that in a second. And the second one is low levels of pretty standard infections that actually escape notice of the standard test. Now, when you put those two things together, they create something which is known as a total stress load. And that total stress load is actually what causes heart disease and what makes you sick with autoimmune disease and other things. So the book is about describing exactly what those are, but it starts with the focus on what's being done about it. And it actually starts with the story of Peter Bartelli and a few other patients whose lives were changed by this approach.
Yeah, and that's an incredible story and a really good point too, because so many of us think, well, this is what my doctor says, and not many people look at it as, hey, it's your body, it's your choice. You can always fire that doctor and go get a second opinion. I think too many of us get stuck. Either we trust them or, we don't question it. I know that was a mistake we had made with my husband. We should have questioned what she had told him, but he trusted her. We didn't know any better, and we went with it. So
yeah, and I always say, don't blame your doctor. The problem is that doctors who are deep into the standard of care system across the United States and even around the world are stuck with a system that we all together have created, and it's called the sick care system. So basically, starting after World War II, even after World War I, with the advent of a lot of these new wonder drugs and antibiotics and everything else, people got into the habit of saying, look, I know I'm sick, just give me something to keep me going so I can earn my living and, keep going as long as possible, which actually worked. And we created this massive pharmaceuticals industry and surgery industry in order to keep us going. But now we have a problem. And that is that, first of all, there's a lot of other things that are starting to interfere right from childhood that are making people chronically ill that sick care industry hasn't been able to address. And the second thing is a lot of the population is getting older, and it doesn't work anymore just to keep you going because it's proving to be ruinously expensive, and it is collapsing our healthcare systems, our sick care systems. So it's time for a change, and that's what the book is about. But it's not about the standard stuff like getting lots of exercise, changing your diet, watching all of those things. Those are important. They're good, but this is a different level. And the reason it's so important right now is because just recently the American Heart Association came out with an official statement saying that hidden stresses such as these heavy metals are actually a major new cause of cardiovascular disease. So it's coming now from the authorities who know all about this, and it's based on 100 years of research into the impacts of these toxic metals.
And that brings me to my next question. Can you help us understand what heavy metals are and why they are a cause for concern?
Yeah, heavy metals, it's a kind of weird thing. Why do they call them heavy? Well, it's actually just a scientific term to say that any metal that is 5 times more dense than water is classified as heavy on the periodic table. And by the way, it's not a music genre. So
it is for my fiance and a lot of other people. I am familiar with that, but yes.
Yeah.
This is a different kind of heavy metal.
Yeah, different kind of heavy metal. So the thing is that these metals have a perfect triad of nastiness. The first one is that they trigger chronic inflammation because your body interprets them as an infection or an invasion. And so it triggers the inflammatory process, which your body is really good at using inflammation to get you out of trouble in the short run. The problem is these metals get embedded in your tissue and your body can't get rid of them. And so that inflammation becomes chronic, and everyone's heard about chronic inflammation and all the problems that it causes. The second one is they disrupt your DNA and they are carcinogenic, so they cause cancer. And the third one is they interfere with your thinking processes because they short circuit your neurons. So that's your triple whammy of nastiness. And basically what the American Heart Association has said, and a number of other studies have said recently, is that the impacts of these metals have been grossly understated, especially at low levels that are not normally detected in medical tests in the standard of care. So we have a giant wave sitting beneath the radar here that people don't even know if they have, because the normal testing won't show it. That's not to say that testing won't show it, but you have to know the right test in order to get the right information.
Yeah. So why have hidden stresses and heavy metals become significantly more important to our health recently? I mean, I would think this has been around a long time. Were we just not
That's right.
seeing it, addressing it, or
Yeah.
environment? I mean,
Yeah, it's, you know something? It's been around for a long time, and the inability to pay attention to it has been around for a long time. That is to say that, modern medicine, well, for the last 100 or so years, they've known that high levels of metals cause poisoning. They know what the symptoms are. This is not that. Okay, this is low levels, and they've always been around. And why do we know that? Because there have been tests done on the bodies of ancient mummies, and bodies that have been found in the receding glaciers, and they have found evidence of these heavy metals. And at the same time, they've actually found evidence of heart disease, because there's these little white lines that actually trace where the arteries used to be. Those little white lines are calcification that is caused by a chronic inflammatory response. In other words, heart disease. So, and these people were in their 30s, a lot of them, when they died. So to be clear, for thousands of years, we've had this issue. We just really haven't known about the extent of it. Now, where is it coming from? Thousands of years ago? As soon as we learned that fire could keep us warm and cook things, and as soon as we learned to grow crops, we started having a heavy metals problem. Why? Heavy metals have been in the earth for billions of years. And when plants uptake the nutrients, and I include trees in that, guess what happens? They also uptake the metals. And so when you burn the trees for fuel, or you eat the grains, or worse yet, you eat the animals that have bioconcentrated the grains, then you start to get this heavy metal load. And so again, it flies beneath the radar. Now, today, answering your question directly, the reason it has become so much more important is because in the last 200 years of the Industrial Revolution, we have discovered that these toxic metals are really great for making things work, especially electronics, leaded gasoline, and all kinds of other stuff. We just happen to have forgotten about the health impacts, or at least understated them. And so the problem, of course, related to that is that we're getting more and more of this stuff inside us from all sorts of things, including a whole bunch of consumer products that still have got lead in them. Some people think that when we got rid of leaded gasoline, we got rid of lead. We did not. It's still in a lot of our products. A lot of studies have shown this. So altogether, we have these multiple sources, including lead in drinking water pipes. And so it's in the air, it's in the water, it's in wildfire smoke. And if I start going on, people will turn this off because it's Christmas and they don't want to be miserable. So the short answer is, yes, this stuff is everywhere, but there are a lot of things that you can do without running off to your physician to actually.
That leads me to my next question. How can individuals take proactive measures to protect themselves from the hidden stress and heavy metals?
Well, the first thing is on the Boxing Day sales, go out and buy a really good air filter for your air handling system, your furnace, or your air conditioner. And the reason I say that is because most filters for these systems are designed to protect the machinery. They're not designed to protect your lungs or your arteries. So the small stuff that gets out of those filters goes into you. And so you want to make sure that that stuff is no longer getting into you. And a really good way to do that is to use these high quality filters. Sometimes they're called HEPA, H-E-P-A filters. They're available at, they're available at hardware stores. They're available from your air conditioning service units. And sometimes the air conditioning guys will say, well, this influences the efficiency of the system. Yeah, well, okay, great. But I'm more interested in the efficiency of my lungs. Thank you very much. So, don't be too afraid to go against that as well. So that's the very first thing you can do. And you can do the same thing on Boxing Day. Go out and buy a really great filter for heavy metals for your tap water and your drinking water. Don't buy plastic bottled water, because when plastic bottled water gets heated up, in a lot of cases, guess what happens? The heavy metals that are in there, because it helps plastic resist all kinds of things like UV radiation and all that stuff, goes into the drinking water or the Coke or the soft drink. So buying bottled plastic water is not necessarily going to protect you from this. The best thing you can do is to put a really high quality filter on your tap. So these are two really great things. And the third thing is so simple, you wouldn't believe it, but that is take off your shoes when you go into your house and put on a pair of house shoes, or just wear your socks. Now, why is that? Because the dust that is outside has high heavy metal content from all of the air pollution settling to the ground, from all this combustion, from coal combustion, oil combustion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you take off your shoes, you're going to prevent a lot of that dust from getting into the house. And also, I have to say, when we babysit some of our friends' pets, I brush them down before I get them into the house to get rid of all the dust they've been rolling in. And so these are really simple, easy things to do. They take about 30 seconds. So, it's no big deal. And it's not just to keep the heavy metals out. It will generally keep you healthier, especially people with allergies, because you're more susceptible to dust, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all stuff that people can do.
Yeah, definitely some good tips. I know we've got the water filter, our system ourselves. We got rid of the plastic bottles. We put everything there, because I was always told, especially when they're baking in the sun, it breaks down the carcinogens out of the plastic and can help cause cancer. So I try to stay away from the plastic bottles myself.
There's one more thing at Christmas. Okay. All that nice Christmas wrapping.
Yep.
Don't burn it in your fireplace. Because that nice shiny Christmas wrapping is full of junk. And even though you think it goes up the chimney, a percentage of it gets into the room. And so you don't want to do that. So there's all kinds of Christmas disposal stuff, and burning is definitely not a solution to pollution. So that's an immediate thing that everybody can avoid starting tomorrow.
That's another good point. Can you provide an overview of the therapies maybe that are available to combat these issues? Because I know there's some therapies out there, and where one might access these treatments.
Well, that's really the good news. And the first therapy is the therapies that I described that aren't described as therapies, which is part of the problem with our sick care system. They don't describe healthy buildings or air filtration as a therapy, but in fact, it is, because it's a preventative therapy. So we need to broaden that definition, of therapy. If you're talking about the traditional or conventional, shall I say, medical therapies, so there are a couple, but most of them involve removing the heavy metals from your tissue. And this can be oral therapies, or this can be what is known as intravenous therapies. A lot of people take infusions for different things. And by the way, it's really popular in Hollywood right now. People have seen, oh, I'm infusing myself. I'm sitting down in a chair for like 2 hours and, got a needle in my arm and I've got all this stuff going into me. Well, this is a particular infusion that has been tried and tested over the past 35 years. And most importantly, if applied according to the way it's supposed to be applied by a qualified physician or other medical expert, I want to emphasize that, is successful at removing these metals from your tissue and reversing the damage done by these hidden stresses. And the reason I say that is because the safety has been proven in a $35 million National Institutes of Health financed clinical trial. So it wasn't financed by a drug company that has a vested interest. It was financed by the public, and it proved that this therapy, which is known commonly as chelation therapy, but chelation is a big word. And so that's why I say read the book and be careful that you understand exactly what chelation is, because there's all kinds of claims out there about chelation. So this chelation therapy was proven successful. Not only that, but in a follow-up small clinical study, and anybody with diabetes, who at Christmas you got to watch yourself if you're diabetic, of course, who is watching or listening to this, please pay special attention. This clinical study showed that diabetic heart patients who had blocked arteries in their legs, and by the way, that's about 10 or 20 million Americans, actually got better. Their blockages were reversed to the extent where the lesions on their legs and toes went away, and they actually avoided major surgery such as amputations. And again, this clinical study was published. It was done in 2017, if you can imagine it. And yet most people haven't heard about it for the simple reason that it's not profitable for the drug companies, and it certainly isn't profitable for vascular surgeons who are making all of their money doing this. And that's not just me saying that, by the way. The New York Times did an expose on these vascular surgeries done for this type of condition that showed that a lot of these operations are unnecessary and they're only done for profit. And that was a detailed, in-depth investigation by the New York Times, which a lot of the health associations have actually agreed to, which is really interesting. They've said, yes, we do have some bad apples in the bunch, and they have to come out. So that's the infusion part of it. And then more recently, there have been oral chelation therapies. Now, earlier, they couldn't use the oral for a simple reason that the substances that are used to grab the heavy metals chemically in your body, there's one substance known as EDTA, and I won't even bother to give you the full name. But EDTA is destroyed by the pH of the stomach. And so when they did tests on it originally, they showed that, well, no, it didn't really work because it never got absorbed into the bloodstream because it all got destroyed in the stomach. Well, that was before the invention of something called enteric coatings, which actually allow these capsules to make their way through mostly to the small intestine, where they then dissolve in a different pH, and then the EDTA can be absorbed along with nutraceuticals and supplements that come with this. And together, they go into the bloodstream and get to the source of the problem. So if you hear a healthcare professional saying either chelation therapy hasn't been tried, it's dangerous, and there's no clinical trial evidence, show them the up-to-date stuff, give them the book. And if they say, yeah, oral chelation doesn't work because it all gets destroyed in the stomach, give them the book and show them the up-to-date information on this as well. So the key thing here is, even if you're not a scientist, know a little bit about the science, and that's why I wrote the book. The book is the only book out there that combines a little bit of information about the science for non-scientific readers with the personal stories of the explorers who discovered how to do this and the patients who are recovering. It's the only book that does that. And that's why I wrote it, because I couldn't find any other book out there that did those two things.
Yeah, and I just started that myself, and it's got lots of great information. And I know we have a lot more to discuss and uncover, but we do need to take a short break from our sponsors, so we will be right back.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat, but the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Relief for PTSD, anxiety, pain, insomnia, and many other ailments. Introducing Vibe, the world's only pocket PEMF device. You place it in your pocket while cooking, cleaning, relaxing, watching TV, sitting at your computer, reading, or walking. Self-contained standalone device. No drugs. No other phone or Bluetooth connections required. No monthly subscription fees. No apps to download. No Bozone. The future of medicine is in the frequencies. Come join the revolution.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm a Dharma Master. I teach Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy. What kind of Qigong do we teach? Well, it helps you to get your mind into your body and your breath very quickly. We really start off with quite quick movements to help cater for the busy Western mind, coming into stretching out the meridians, waking up the chakra system and the danjons, coming into Jigan meditation, which helps you to really focus on the energy in and around your body, bringing you into that beautiful calm state where you can sit and meditate really easily, whereas maybe before you found it really difficult. So Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy will help you get more in touch with yourself.
And we are back. So we were talking about your book. How does your book, Discovering the Nature of Longevity, guide the readers on dealing with these pressing health concerns?
Well, actually, your sponsors are going to love me because I'm actually, there was a lot of talk during the sponsors' ads about flexibility. You heard stretching, measuring your flexibility and everything else. Well, in the book, I describe what it is that actually makes you flexible. And guess what? In your skin, for example, people are told, well, collagen makes your skin flexible. Nope. Collagen does not make your skin flexible. Collagen gives your skin strength and rigidity, of all things. It's the opposite of flexibility. The thing that makes your skin flexible, and by the way, as well your arteries and all your organs, including your lungs and heart, and also allows you to move around, is something called elastin fiber. And this fiber is woven in between all of those collagen fibers. And that's what allows you to have both strength and flexibility at the same time. And in the book, I tell the story of this elastin fiber, and I'm going to show you why right now. And I hope this is going to show up on the camera. But here you have, there we go. So what I'm holding up here is two images. One image over here is this nice, smooth network of these elastic fibers in a 6-year-old. Over here is a big mess in a 90-year-old. And wow. Guess what? That's happening inside of all of us. So imagine what happens to your flexibility when that starts happening to all of the elastic in your body, as it does in all of us. Now, what is causing that? Exactly these hidden stresses are causing that. And so the reason that you haven't heard about this is because until very recently, no one knew how to fix this elastic fiber, and very few people knew how to actually reduce the stresses on it that are causing this problem in the first place. Now, we've already talked at the top of the show about how these stresses can be reduced and how they can be effectively treated. But the damage to the elastic fiber itself, as I describe in the book, is something else entirely, because this stuff is very hard to get at with therapy. Now, in 2007, scientists that I have had the honor of working with at Clemson University made an amazing discovery. They discovered that a naturally derived substance is very good at kickstarting the elastic fiber assembly process in your body. Now, why is that important? Because around the age of 30, everybody stops producing elastic fiber. No one knows why. The world's top experts don't know why. I've talked to all of them, right? And I, by the way, I'm a co-founder of a company that is working with the scientists at Clemson University. So believe me, I know all these guys. And so it's an amazing thing that they actually discovered this substance, which is known as pentagalloyl glucose, or PGG for short. And it's a polyphenol, which is found, polyphenols are found in the skin of grapes. They're found in tree bark, the stuff that's in red wine, for example, that comes out of the grapes. But there's one particular kind of polyphenol called PGG that's found in the rind of some fruits. And this is what they discovered kickstarts this assembly process. So that was in 2007. Recently, the first clinical study in a human showed that this can restore the elastic fiber in damaged arteries, in particular in aneurysms that afflict millions and millions and millions of Americans. And anyone who has it knows your doctor will say, we need to keep a watching brief on it because there's no effective treatment for it aside from really dangerous surgery. So this is a major breakthrough because when this substance was applied through a temporary stent to the aneurysm, it prevented the aneurysm from bursting. It's really the first time that this has happened without major surgery. This is totally exciting. And this is the story that I tell in the book alongside these stories of the other therapies that we just talked about earlier. So the book basically brings people through, starts with these great stories of successes, then talks about how the inventors and discoverers came across these things, then talks a little bit about the science of how this stuff works. And then the book finishes with some of the more advanced technologies like the one that I just spoke about that are coming down the pipe and are making their way into the clinic. And I'm proud to say that our company is one of the few companies in the world that actually has this therapy for this damaged elastin, and that company is Elastrin Therapeutics. But the exciting thing is it's not just our company that's working on this. There's half a dozen companies around the world that have succeeded in repairing this elastic fiber that no one has heard about. This is the really interesting thing, right? Can you imagine? Every breath you take and every step you make is driven by elastic fiber, and very few people have been told about it. So that's my Christmas present to everybody. The elastic fiber that drives your life is now repairable.
Wow. It's amazing. Like you said, this stuff's been around a long time. There's so many companies and stuff researching it, yet we don't ever hear about it. And when you're holding up those pictures, the one for the 90-year-old looks like everything's just ready to just snap and break.
And that's because eventually that's what kills us. We all turn to stone. So that when it gets frayed like that, it stiffens, it calcifies. And people who, they call them supercentenarians, who live, longer than 100, eventually they all die because they turn to stone. Everything just creaks to a halt. And that is because of this chronic inflammatory, almost invisible response that builds up over time with the heavy metals, the hidden infections, and all the stresses that lead to this calcification and that destroy this elastic fiber. So imagine, Laura, if we're able to actually reverse the damage that is done. This is not a cure, but boy, it's the next best thing.
Definitely is. That's like I always said, if you got something natural and there's a way you can fix it, and you're talking about the rinds of, like certain fruits and stuff. I think it's amazing what's out there. That's why I love doing this and meeting people from across the world, because there's things out there that we just don't know.
And I just actually want to explain so people know where I came from on this little game. I'm not a medical professional. I came actually from a completely different direction that most medical professionals are not trained in, and that is creating healthy products and buildings that protect people from these hidden stresses. That's why I was talking about the air filtration, but also the quality of materials that go into products and buildings. And that's what I've been doing for the last few decades, is actually training designers on how to design this. And the scientists that I work with at two institutes, one is called EPEA. It's a little joke on the Environmental Protection Agency. We have the Environmental Protection Encouragement Agency.
Yep.
So they specialize in analyzing and keeping these heavy metals out of these products, or at least keeping them away from people. And that's one reason why the standard medical care has really not dealt with this, because most medical professionals don't take that training. Any toxicology training they usually take is for drug interactions, but it is not for You never hear a doctor talking about the quality of air in your building. It's happening. It's starting to happen. Air
Right.
quality is now, of course, been ranked as the #2 cause of heart disease deaths. So doctors are starting to pay attention to it. The needle is beginning to move, but any of the older professionals, unless they've taken an update on their training, they just don't take the training. It's not their fault. The system is designed that way.
Right. And some of those filters are amazing. I know the BMW I used to own had like a double HEPA filter, and if your windows were up, you could pass a skunk, things on fire, whatever. You never smelt any of it in the car. It just filtered everything before it came in. And plus I worked in a clean room at one time too, where you had to make sure all those particles were out. I worked in a clean room, and
yes,
if I walked too fast, I got harassed about disturbing their laminar flow because I'm like moving.
That's actually a really good thing, because a lot of this technology came from clean rooms and in operating theaters, for example. Clean rooms used to be used a lot in also, manufacturing of chips, but that's sort of gone by the wayside. But in operating rooms, it's especially important. And they discovered that a lot of patients were getting infections because the so-called clean rooms were blowing air down over the patients. And of course, before it got to the patient, it went past the surgeon, and the surgeon was polluting the patients with their tie. Their tie had all kinds of germs on it, and even their breath that was coming out of the mask. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because obviously you're well attuned to that. So clean room technology is where a lot of this knowledge came from. And I've spoken to clean room technologists who've designed these rooms, and they say the same thing. Doctors are not trained in this at all, which is why we ended up with this problem with patients getting infected for so long. Thankfully, that has now largely been solved, although not completely. If you're going to have an operation, you should ask about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were doing, was manufacturing the semiconductors. And you go through the airway, and it's got the holes in the floor so that everything circulates through. You have a certain suit you have to put on. The only thing you see of anybody is their eyes, because you're covered head to toe with stuff. So you got to recognize people by their eyeballs and their body shape and the way they walk, because that's the only thing you could see out of that.
Yeah, and now they're blowing the air away from the surgeon and the patient. It was a very subtle change, but it has made a huge difference.
Wow. Yeah. So can you share maybe some of the common signs or symptoms that, people might indicate a person is dealing with I'm sure we're all dealing with hidden stress, but, in the exposure to heavy metals, are there some that are like more pronounced?
Yeah. Here's the thing. If you take a blood test for heavy metals, you will not come up with an accurate result for a very simple reason. The metals are in your tissue. They're not in your blood. The reason that they test blood for heavy metals is if they suspect lead poisoning. And there was an example, actually, just a short while ago of, if you can believe it, babies coming down with lead poisoning after eating tainted baby food. Wow. Baby food. Now, just to go into that a little more, and not to spoil people's Christmas, but I have to say, Consumer Reports has come out with 2 studies that show that baby foods are heavily contaminated. Not all of them, by the way, but a lot of them are heavily contaminated with these heavy metals, especially lead and cadmium. And it's just incredible that this is happening. Why is it happening? Because guess what? Federal regulation doesn't govern a lot of this. So if you think that regulations are protecting you from these levels of metals, think again. Read Consumer Reports, and here's another Christmas present. Just read the Consumer Reports and find out which of these brands, including for chocolates, by the way, have either no levels or much lower levels of these metals. So that's another really effective thing that you can do to keep this stuff out of you.
Wow. Yeah. That's kind of amazing. That's kind of shocking that you have that even in baby food.
Yeah. So then you go on. I apologize for interrupting.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, then you go on to what does work. And what does work, oddly enough, is something called a challenge test, where they give you some of this chelation over a period of about an hour. And then they do a urine test, because you pee it out. And so the chelation basically grabs the stuff, and then it comes out in your urine, and then they can measure the levels. And from that, even from some of the best doctors, and there's only a handful of them right now, can actually do a normal urine test and extrapolate from that based on the results that they got from these challenge tests. But that's very rare. That most people don't know how to do that. So the more effective one is to do this challenge test, and that's available from any naturopathic doctor usually, or a holistic cardiologist or physician. They know how to do this stuff, and it's available in many states across the U.S. You just have to go looking for it. And what this will show is, and this is what they found in the clinical study that was done, is that what shows up as acceptable levels in the baseline test is not acceptable at all after you've done the challenge. In fact, what they found in patients with peripheral artery disease, diabetic patients, was that they had a level of lead coming out of them 3,000% higher than the baseline. 3,000%. And this was the proof in the pudding, because as those metals came out of the peripheral artery disease patients, they improved and they avoided amputation. And that's where this evidence is coming from. So in summary, yes, you can definitely get tested for this stuff and know. And as we mentioned before, there's a lot of stuff that you can do to prevent this from getting into you. You will never completely prevent it. So you've got to be aware that we're all going to be exposed to some of this, but that's why we need to take a sort of a holistic approach to the whole thing, and not just sort of one size fits all.
Yeah, I always say there is no such thing as one size fits all, because we're all individuals. We're all different. Things are going to work differently for us. And It also depends on what you're open to, and doing. But I like to at least try to provide people with options, so that you have options. Because when you don't know what you don't know, there's not much, you can do about that.
And here's the book, just so people know. And that's where all the options are actually, shown. So give yourself a post-Christmas present. Go to Amazon and get the book.
That is good. I think we probably discussed a lot of these, the breakthroughs. Or what about the breakthroughs or advancements in the medical field related to these issues? Are you seeing them?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And just to give you an example, there's now at least, I would say, a dozen longevity conferences around the world where startups like ours, for example, are presenting these breakthrough technologies in a whole range of areas. And what's really interesting is that they're not just focusing on cells. This elastic fiber that I described earlier, it's not in your cells. The ingredients are produced from your cells, but the fiber occurs outside of cells in what's known as the extracellular space that's outside of your cells, which, by the way, is the biggest space in your body. So, people think your body's full of cells. It is, but it's full of even a larger space. And that has just been declared the 80th and largest organ in the body. There's another Christmas present, because most people have never heard of this. So this is really important, that these new technologies aren't just looking at cells, but they're looking at what's in the space outside your cells. And that's why that's how we made the breakthrough with elastic fiber. We didn't look in the cell. We looked outside of the cells. And when I say we, that would be Dr. Naren Vivahari and Dr. Charles Rice at Clemson University, who are the chief scientists who worked on this at Clemson and with our company, Elastrin Therapeutics, but also with a number of other companies.
Wow. Yeah. I just started reading your book, but I really look forward to continuing with that and diving in. Might even help give me some answers, or some understandings of what went wrong.
Yeah. And in that sense, it's a good reference that you're going to want to keep on your shelf. It's not something you're going to whiz through in an hour and then put down and know everything. It's designed to, just keep it on the shelf, and you can refer back to it. And it's got more than 700 scientific references. But I emphasize again, it is written for non-scientific readers, to be clear.
Yeah, I know some people really don't like the science. They just kind of want the lowdown. Other people are very scientific and want to know what's behind it.
Yeah. And, all you need to do is read read the foreword by Dr. Gervais Lamas, who is the chief of cardiology at Columbia University and the chief author of the American Heart Association statement on heavy metals. And he describes why the book is so important. And then the introduction will give you a very quick view of what the rest of the book is all about. And those together are a good 1 hour read. So that's what I suggest that actually people start with.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, how optimistic are you about the future of longevity given our increased awareness of these factors?
I'm very optimistic about it, as long as we don't fool ourselves into thinking that this is the magic elixir. The human body is an extremely complicated place. And as you said, and I said earlier, one size does not fit all. There's something else that we haven't even talked about, which is epigenetics. It's the impact of your environment on your genes, which is responsible for 70 to 80% of all chronic diseases, by the way, not the genes themselves. So if you have a genetic defect, it doesn't mean you're going to get something. It's the environment that has that effect. So you have to take that into account when you start talking about longevity. And so there's still a lot of places to be filled in. And I know that there are a number of books out there that talk about living forever, which is good. It's a good thing to aim for. But live well forever is important. And what's important to most people is the next 10 to 20 years. And that's what I focus on is I'll steal a line from Ray Kurzweil, how to live long enough to live forever. So I'm not focusing on the live forever stuff. The reason I call it the nature of longevity is this is to describe the hidden things that actually affect the very nature of longevity. And some of the solutions in there, but by no means all of them. I don't pretend to have all of the answers to this.
Yeah, and I don't remember which colleague it was of mine, but one of them basically said, one size fits none. And I'm like, there you go. One size fits none. I need to steal that.
Yeah. So and in the post-Christmas season, when everyone's feeling guilty after New Year's, this is a really good book to sit down to. So go out and get it for yourself and then read it when you're feeling guilty in January. And it'll give you some hope that, there's stuff that can be done.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up about the epigenetics and, the genetics, because there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, this is this, and they think just because it's ran in their family that they have to accept that that's what's coming for them. And you don't. Like you said, it's environment, it's other things. And I love all of this because it's really looking at fixing the body as a whole. Everything we've been doing with our medical system, to me, is just throwing a Band-Aid on stuff. And we need to stop throwing a Band-Aid on and figure out what caused it and fix the cause rather than.
Yeah. And what's interesting about what you're saying is I think that's really now being accepted in mainstream medicine. Everyone knows the system is broken. We don't have to say that anymore, although you'd be surprised, because there's a lot of vested interests around there who want to keep business as usual. But if you talk to any sane physician out there, they're going to say, yeah, of course the system is broken and I'm stuck with it. My medical board is down my throat, and so, like I say, don't blame your doctor, but don't hesitate to get a second opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we did not do this to be doom and gloom. It is to give people hope. I know it's a very stressful time with the holidays. What are some parting thoughts that you would like to share with people for this Christmas season?
Look to the new year with optimism, because there are solutions out there to problems that are affecting us and we didn't even know about. So don't hesitate to get a second opinion, and don't hesitate to educate yourself and take responsibility for your own health.
And what is on the horizon for you?
Well, I would say my mission is to give the information to people through shows like yours. And I want to thank you especially for bringing attention to this, because it's the only way that people are going to find out about this. So I I would say, like they say in the military, if people don't hear it the first time, tell them again. And if they don't hear it the second time, tell them again. And if they don't hear it the third time, tell them one more time. And people need to hear it from different places, and that's what your show is doing. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, and I love bringing different people on because we all have different perspectives. As I said, we're individuals. We're all going to resonate with different people, but I think we've got enough people out there that deal with the stress. We've got mental health that have lost people due to heart issues and all of this, and knowing that there's something else that we can do to maybe alleviate that, I think is wonderful. So thank you for taking the time to be on here too.
Thank you. And for those who came late into the show, you can just go to Amazon and order the book.
Yep. And we will put that back up there for you. You can also go to his website, thenatureoflongevity.com. I believe they can link to your book and other things that you have on there as well.
Yeah, there's lots of news items there on stuff that has come up after the book is published. We're doing updates, but I'm putting the updates also on the website so that people can see them.
And is that the best way for people to contact you if they want to reach out or have questions or just want to connect with you?
Actually, they can contact me at info@calcify.com. So it's info at CALCI, F as in Frank, Y. That's short for calcification, but so it's info@calcify.com. And I welcome feedback from people on the book. I hope they do reviews and put them on the Amazon website, because we've got lots of great reviews, and I've had lots of fans. We had 35 pre-readers of the book, including 4 physicians, and that was immensely helpful. We actually tore the book apart and put it back together again after getting feedback from all these people. So any feedback is more than welcome, really.
And I will be happy to do that myself. I'll have to say, so far, as much scientific things as you talk, but it's actually an easy read. You break it down, you make it very simple to follow and understand, where you don't get lost in like a whole bunch of big terminology. Plus, you got a glossary in case you get stuck. So,
yes, there's a glossary in the back.
That is always nice too. So, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us on Christmas, and I hope everyone has a happy holiday. Merry Christmas, however it is that you celebrate, and look forward to a wonderful new year.
A great and productive new year where we can all work towards being healthier.
Healthier ones, yep. And that starts with being mindful and taking better care of yourself, which is what I am all about, mindfulness and self-care. So that is my wish to everyone, is that this is reaching everyone that it needs to reach, and that we can all live a happier, healthier life. That's my whole goal. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week.